Behavioral psychology reveals something most people misunderstand. Habits don't become powerful because they're enjoyable. They become powerful because they're predictable. The brain doesn't crave pleasure as much as it craves certainty. When an action becomes predictable, the brain stops negotiating with it. And that's where real discipline begins. In the early stages, every decision feels heavy. Should I work out today? Should I focus or procrastinate? Should I stay consistent or give myself a break? Each question drains mental energy. This is called decision fatigue, and it quietly sabotages progress. But 6 months of disciplined repetition changes the equation. The brain no longer asks if you'll act, it assumes you will. As predictability increases, resistance decreases. Neural pathways strengthen. The action moves from the prefrontal cortex, where effort and willpower are required, into automatic processing. That shift frees cognitive resources. Energy that was once spent debating is now available for creativity, problem solving, and long-term thinking. This is why disciplined people often appear calmer and clearer. It's not that they have more motivation, it's that their brains are carrying less friction. Discipline simplifies the internal environment. It reduces noise. It creates mental space. And this is where most people get it wrong. They think discipline is about force, pressure, or intensity. It is. Discipline is about removing unnecessary choices until the right action becomes the default. Consistency stops feeling like struggle and starts feeling like structure. If learning how discipline simplifies the brain rather than exhausting it resonates with you, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this message, because someone else may still be mistaking repetition for punishment instead of freedom. Chapter 1. The 6-month contract. 6 months is not a long time. It is not a lifetime. It is not someday. It is a season. It is short enough to feel urgent and long enough to change everything. People ruin their lives in 6 months. They also rebuild them in 6 months. The difference is not talent. The difference is not luck. The difference is discipline applied daily, especially when it feels boring, inconvenient, or pointless. Picture a man standing at the edge of a frozen lake. The ice looks solid, but he has heard stories about it breaking. He kneels, tests it, and then stands back up. He wants the other side, but he also wants comfort. He can't have both. So he takes one careful step, then another. At first, nothing changes, no applause, no fireworks, just cold air and a quiet lake. Halfway across, the wind picks up and his doubt gets louder than his desire. He thinks about going back. That's the moment that decides his life. Not the moment he dreamed about crossing. Not the moment he told someone he would. The moment he is already committed, already cold, already tired, and the only thing that can carry him forward is a decision he renews without anyone watching. That is what 6 months of discipline feels like. You start with inspiration, sure, but you finish with identity. 6 months is the bridge between who you are today and who you keep saying you want to become. You don't cross it by thinking. You cross it by doing, on schedule, under pressure, without negotiation. Most people don't fail because they aim too high. They fail because they keep resetting the clock. They have day ones like a collection. Monday becomes a ritual of hope and Friday becomes a ritual of surrender. They confuse planning with progress and movement with meaning. They read, they watch, they talk, they promise. Then they disappear when the work gets repetitive. Discipline is not loud. Discipline is not dramatic. Discipline is the quiet agreement you keep with yourself when you would rather break it. Here's the hard truth. Motivation is a visitor. Discipline is a resident. Motivation comes knocking when the weather is good and the results are obvious. Discipline stays when the days are heavy and the mirror is honest. Motivation asks, "Do you feel like it?" Discipline says, "We're doing it anyway." Think about a young woman named Lena. She wasn't famous. She wasn't a prodigy. She worked an average job, paid average bills, and carried an average level of anxiety that felt anything but average when she lay awake at night. She had a dream to change her life, and she kept waiting for the moment she would feel ready. One day she looked at her bank account, her health, and her calendar, and she realized something sharp. Waiting was not neutral. Waiting was a decision. Waiting was a direction. Waiting was costing her, so she made a contract, not with the world, with herself. 6 months. No exceptions she couldn't explain in one sentence. No, "I'll make it up later." No bargaining with her own standards. Her contract wasn't complicated. Wake up at the same time. Move her body for 30 minutes. Eat like she respected her future. Study one skill daily that would increase her income. Track every dollar. Sleep like her life depended on it because it did. Simple, not easy. Simple. The first week was exciting. The second week was uncomfortable. By week 3, her mind got creative. It suggested compromises that sounded reasonable. You worked hard today, you can skip tomorrow. You're tired, you need rest. You're stressed, you deserve a treat. Notice how the voice never says, "Quit." It says, "Just this once." And just this once is the doorway to the old life. Lena learned something important. The enemy wasn't effort. The enemy was negotiation. The moment she started debating with herself, she lost time, and time is the only currency you never get back. She needed a system that removed debate. So she built rules, not goals. Rules, goals are outcomes. Rules are behavior, goals can be delayed. Rules are daily. Goals live in the future. Rules live in the present. Goals are sometimes vague. Rules are specific. Her rule for exercise wasn't "get fit." It was shoes on and outside by 6:15. Her rule for learning wasn't improve my career. It was 1 hour of focused study before work. Her rule for money wasn't save more. It was every purchase recorded immediately. The rules didn't make her perfect. They made her consistent, and consistency over 6 months is a force. The power of 6 months of discipline is not that it makes you superhuman. It's that it makes you reliable to yourself. When you become reliable to yourself, confidence stops being a mood and becomes a fact. Confidence isn't shouting in the mirror, it's proof, it's evidence, it's the memory of promises kept. Discipline is a relationship. Every time you do what you said you would do, you deposit trust. Every time you break your word to yourself, you withdraw trust. People talk about self-love like it's a warm feeling. Real self-love is self-respect. Self-respect is built in the small moments when you could take the easy road and you choose the right one instead. Now let's talk about why 6 months matters specifically. The brain is wired to seek immediate reward. If the payoff is far away, the brain tries to conserve energy. That's why long-term change feels hard at the start. The reward isn't here yet, so your mind tells you the work is pointless. 6 months is a sweet spot where the brain begins to see patterns and results. In the first month, you're planting seeds. In the second and third, you're watering in the dark. In the fourth, something starts to break the surface. In the fifth and sixth, you begin harvesting. But you never harvest what you don't plant, and you never plant what you keep postponing. There's another reason 6 months is powerful. It's long enough to expose your excuses. You can fake effort for a week. You can sprint for a month. But 6 months reveals your real standard. It shows you where you disappear, where you self-sabotage, where you pretend you don't have time while you spend hours on distractions that leave you emptier. Discipline is not about doing more. It's about doing what matters, even when it's not fun, especially when it's not fun. Because if you can only do it when it's fun, you don't control your life. Your emotions do. There's a metaphor I want you to carry through this entire audiobook. Imagine your life is a ship. Your habits are the crew. Your goals are the destination. Motivation is the weather. If you rely on weather to move your ship, you will drift. Discipline is the engine. It doesn't care if it's sunny. It doesn't care if it's stormy. It moves you forward because that is what it is built to do. You don't need more motivation. You need a stronger engine. That engine is built with a few parts. The first part is a clear why, not a soft one. Not "I want to be healthier," a real one. The kind that makes you uncomfortable because it's honest. The kind that admits what happens if you don't change. The kind that names what you lose, not just what you gain. Lena wrote hers down, not the polished version, the truth. She wrote that she was tired of feeling like life was happening to her. She wrote that she didn't want to be the person who had potential but never used it. She wrote that she was afraid of becoming bitter. She wrote that she wanted to be proud when she looked back. Not impressed, proud. The second part is a standard. A standard is different from a goal. A standard is how you live. A standard is what you tolerate and what you do not tolerate. A standard is the line you stop crossing. A standard is the version of you that doesn't need constant pep talks because it has boundaries. The third part is friction control. Make the right habit easier and the wrong habit harder. Lay out your clothes the night before. Put the phone in another room. Schedule the workout like a meeting. Prepare food in advance. Automate savings. Remove decisions where you can. Willpower is limited. Systems are not. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this, leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now let's continue. Now we go deeper because discipline isn't just a schedule. It's a mindset shift. Most people see discipline as punishment. That's why they resist it. They associate it with restriction, deprivation, and pressure. But discipline isn't punishment. Discipline is freedom purchased in advance. When you build discipline, you buy options, you buy health, you buy time, you buy confidence. You buy the ability to walk away from situations that don't serve you. You buy the right to say no because you're not desperate. You buy stability when chaos hits. You don't get that by drifting. Look at any area of life where people feel trapped. Money, health, relationships, career. Often the trap isn't a sudden event, it's the compound effect of undisciplined days. Small indulgences repeated, small avoidance repeated, small excuses repeated. It builds a cage so slowly you don't notice until you try to move and realize you can't. 6 months of discipline is how you start bending the bars. Let's make this practical right now. For the next 6 months, you need 3 anchors. Not 10, not 20, 3. Anchors are non-negotiable behaviors that stabilize everything else. One anchor should protect your body. That might be daily movement, strength training 3 times a week, or a consistent sleep schedule. If your body is weak, your discipline will be fragile. Energy is not a luxury, it's fuel. One anchor should protect your mind. That might be reading, journaling, meditation, therapy, or focused learning. The mind either trains itself or gets trained by whatever you consume. If you don't choose your inputs, someone else will. One anchor should protect your future. That could be building a skill, creating a side income, improving your work performance, or managing your finances with precision. You can't build a different life with the same habits that created the current one. These anchors work because they create momentum, and momentum is the secret weapon. Momentum makes hard things easier, not because they become easy, but because you become the kind of person who doesn't stop. Now I want to address the moment you will inevitably face, the day you fail. Because you will, not because you're weak, but because you're human. You will miss a workout, you will eat poorly, you will procrastinate, you will waste time. The disciplined person isn't the one who never slips. The disciplined person is the one who doesn't turn a slip into a slide. There's a difference between a mistake and an identity. A mistake is an event. An identity is a story you repeat until it becomes true. If you miss one day and tell yourself, "See, I always quit," you didn't just miss a day. You rewrote who you are. But if you miss one day and tell yourself, "I'm the kind of person who returns to the plan immediately," you just protected your identity. 6 months of discipline is mostly about recovering fast. It's about not letting emotions hijack your direction. It's about not giving one bad moment the authority to define your week. It's about being the person who doesn't dramatize setbacks, who doesn't turn them into a personality, who simply returns to the standard. Lena had a bad week in month 2. A family issue hit her hard. Her sleep fell apart. Her eating got messy. Her workout stopped. She felt the old familiar shame creeping in, the kind that whispers, "You've ruined it, so why bother?" But she did something different. She didn't try to fix her whole life in one day. She returned to one anchor. She started with sleep. Lights out on time, phone away, consistent wake up. Within days, her energy came back. Then she returned to movement, then to learning. The discipline returned like a tide, not dramatic, just steady. That is the power. You don't need perfection. You need the ability to restart without self-hate. So here's the real promise of 6 months. If you choose your anchors, protect your standards, remove negotiation, and return quickly when you slip, you will not recognize yourself. Not because you became someone else, but because you finally met the version of you that was always waiting behind excuses. 6 months from now, you will be living in the results of your daily choices. Not your intentions, not your plans, your choices. The question is not whether you have time. The question is what you are spending it on. The question is not whether you feel ready. The question is whether you are willing to be uncomfortable long enough to become free. As this chapter closes, let the mind get quiet and look straight at the truth. What is the standard you have been avoiding because it would require you to change your routine? What promise to yourself have you broken so many times that you stopped believing your own words? What would your life look like in 6 months if you kept your word every day, especially on the days you didn't feel like it? And what will it cost you if you keep resetting the clock and calling it patience? Chapter 2. The system that care how you feel. In the last chapter, you stepped onto the ice. You saw that 6 months is a season with enough time to change everything, and you learned that the real enemy isn't effort, it's negotiation. You met the idea of anchors, standards, friction control, and the quiet power of returning fast after a slip. Now we take that contract and turn it into something stronger than mood, a system that holds you up on the days you don't. A disciplined life is not built on heroic willpower. Willpower is a match. It lights quickly and dies quickly. A disciplined life is built on structure, and structure is a fireplace. It takes intention to build, but once it's built, it keeps burning even when the wind shows up. Most people try to change their life the way they try to carry too many grocery bags at once. They grip harder, strain, and wobble toward the door, telling themselves they just need to try more. Then a bag breaks, everything hits the ground, and they blame themselves for being weak. They weren't weak. They were careless with the method. Discipline isn't about gripping harder. It's about making fewer trips with better handles and building a path that doesn't punish you for being human. Here is the truth that will save you months of frustration. You will not rise to your goals. You will fall to your systems. On the days you feel unstoppable, you don't need a system. On the days you feel heavy, distracted, discouraged, or angry, your system is the only thing that can carry you forward. So the goal of this chapter is simple. You're going to build a system that continues even when your emotions try to shut it down. Let's begin with what a system really is. A system is not a perfect plan. A system is a set of defaults. It's what you do when you're not thinking. It's what happens automatically because you decided once and then stopped debating it every day. If your life is full of daily debates, you are exhausting yourself before the work even starts. People think discipline is doing hard things. That's only part of it. Discipline is also refusing to have the same argument with yourself over and over again. Discipline is ending the negotiation permanently. Imagine a factory that needs to produce 1,000 units a day. The manager doesn't come in each morning and ask the workers, "Do you feel like producing today?" The factory has a schedule. It has procedures, it has quality control, it has maintenance. The factory produces because it's built to produce. Your life needs the same idea. You don't need more emotional intensity. You need better procedures. Now, the biggest mistake people make when building a system is trying to build the whole factory at once. They try to redesign everything in a weekend. Then Monday arrives, the system collapses, and they decide they're the kind of person who can't stay consistent. No. They built a system that didn't match reality. Your system must respect two things. It must respect the way humans actually behave, and it must respect the life you actually live. Humans follow cues. Humans conserve energy. Humans avoid discomfort if there's no immediate consequence. Your system must assume you will be tempted, distracted, and tired. That's not pessimism. That's intelligence. And your system must fit your life. You have a demanding job, a family, health issues, or unpredictable shifts. Your system must be flexible in the right way. Not flexible like anything goes. Flexible like the standard stays, the method adapts. This is where minimum standards become priceless. A minimum standard is a version of the habit you can do on your worst day. Not a fake habit, a real one, small but meaningful. The minimum standard keeps the chain intact. It keeps identity intact. It keeps the engine warm. Consider an athlete who trains for a marathon. The athlete doesn't train the same way every day. Some days are long runs, some days are recovery, some days are strength. But the standard is consistent. Show up, do the work scheduled for that day, protect recovery, respect nutrition. The athlete wins because the plan isn't dependent on feeling excited. You are not training for a marathon. You are training for a new identity. So let's talk about identity again, because identity is the root. Most people try to use discipline to achieve something. The disciplined person uses discipline to become someone. If you want to become a disciplined person, you must stop seeing discipline as something you do sometimes. Discipline is what you do. It's who you are. And identity is shaped by repeated action, not by self-talk. Your mind listens to your behavior more than it listens to your words. If you tell yourself you're serious but you skip the work, your behavior wins. If you tell yourself you're disciplined but you keep negotiating, your behavior wins. If you tell yourself you're changing but you keep defaulting to comfort, your behavior wins. So your system must create repeated evidence. Small evidence, daily evidence, undeniable evidence. Here's a story that makes this real. A man named Andre worked in a warehouse. Strong arms, strong back, and a mind that felt stuck in the same loop. He wanted to leave that job not because he was ungrateful, but because he was tired of feeling like his future was being decided by other people's schedules. He wanted a better career. He wanted stability. He wanted to be able to help his mother without feeling like he was drowning. Andre tried motivation. He watched videos. He wrote goals. He even bought courses. But at the end of the day, he came home exhausted. His mind told him he deserved rest, and he did. But he also deserved a future, and he kept trading the future for the comfort of the present. One night he wrote a sentence on a piece of paper and taped it to his door: no 0 days. He wasn't saying he would do a full study session every day. He was saying he would never do nothing. No 0 days, even if he studied for 10 minutes, even if he read one page, even if he practiced a small skill for a short time. No 0 days. At first it felt silly. 10 minutes doesn't feel like change. But after 2 weeks, something happened. The habit started pulling him instead of him pushing the habit. He came home and automatically opened his laptop. He didn't have to hype himself up. He didn't have to bargain. He started before his mind could create excuses. After a month, he increased from 10 minutes to 20, then to 40, then to an hour. But the foundation was not the hour. The foundation was the identity of a man who does not allow a day to pass without investing in his future. That is system thinking. You don't build discipline by demanding massive output on day one. You build discipline by removing the option to do nothing. Now let's build your system with 4 simple components, not as a list you read once, as a framework you live. First is the trigger. Every habit needs a starting gun. If you leave the start up to your mood, you won't start consistently. You need a trigger that is tied to something that already happens. The best triggers are attached to routines that never disappear. Waking up, brushing teeth, making coffee, finishing work, getting home, eating lunch, putting your head on the pillow. If you want to read daily, attach it to coffee. If you want to stretch daily, attach it to brushing teeth. If you want to study daily, attach it to arriving home from work. If you want to track spending, attach it to purchasing anything. The trigger is the door you walk through. Without a door, you keep wandering around outside. Second is the action. This is the behavior itself. The action must be clearly defined, not work out more, not eat healthier, not be productive. The action must be something you can measure and complete. Shoes on and walk for 20 minutes. Write 500 words. Study for 30 minutes with phone in another room. Protein and vegetables at each meal. Track all spending within 5 minutes of purchase. Clarity is discipline. Vagueness is an excuse factory. Third is the reward. This is where most people get it wrong. They think the reward is the long-term result. It's not. The reward must be immediate enough that your brain learns the habit is worth repeating. The reward can be small: a cup of tea after training, a shower that feels earned, a song you only listen to after finishing the session, marking an X on a calendar, a short moment of pride as you record the completion. The reward is not bribery, it's training. And fourth is the scoreboard. If you don't track it, it doesn't exist. Not because it didn't happen, but because your mind will minimize your effort when you're tired and maximize your excuses when you're tempted. Tracking keeps you honest. A scoreboard is not for shame. It's for clarity. It's for pattern recognition. It's for building evidence. Now I want to introduce a concept that will protect you for 6 months, the 2-day rule. The 2-day rule is simple. You can miss once, but you don't miss twice. You can have a bad day. You can have a surprise. You can be human. But you do not allow 2 misses in a row, because 2 misses becomes a new habit. 2 misses creates a story. 2 misses is the beginning of the old identity creeping back in. You don't need perfection. You need a boundary. If you miss your workout today, fine. Tomorrow you move. Even if it's the minimum standard, if you overeat today, fine. Tomorrow you return to the plan. If you waste time today, fine. Tomorrow you show up. This rule is not about guilt. It's about trajectory. A plane that is 1 degree off course ends up somewhere completely different over time. Small deviations compound. The 2-day rule is the correction mechanism. Now let's get real about the hardest part, the moment right before you start. That moment is where your brain tries to protect you. It says, this will be uncomfortable. It says, this will take effort. It says, this might not work. It says, you can do it later. Your system needs a way to defeat that moment. The best way is a launch ritual. A launch ritual is a short sequence that tells your brain, we're working now. It removes the decision. It begins the motion. For example, before studying, your launch ritual could be clear the desk, fill a glass of water, set a timer, put the phone away, open the notes. That's it. Not a motivational speech. Not a 10-minute pep talk. A simple sequence that signals start. Before exercise, your launch ritual could be put on shoes, step outside, start a warm-up song, begin moving. Again, simple. Launch rituals matter because starting is often the hardest part. Once you begin, your mind adapts. There is a reason people can spend an hour dreading a 10-minute task. The dread is not proportional to the task. The dread is the mind resisting discomfort. The solution is motion, not more thinking. So here's your rule. When you feel resistance, shorten the distance between you and the first step. Don't tell yourself you have to finish the whole workout. Tell yourself you have to put on your shoes. Don't tell yourself you have to complete the whole study session. Tell yourself you have to open the book and set a timer for 5 minutes. Your goal is not to win the entire battle at once. Your goal is to win the opening minute. Now I want to bring you into another story, because stories make discipline feel real, not theoretical. There was a woman named Sana who wanted to transform her health. She had tried before. She had started diets with excitement and ended them with shame. Her problem wasn't knowledge. She knew what to eat. Her problem was the nightly collapse. By evening, she was drained. Work stress, family responsibilities, constant mental load. She would tell herself she deserved comfort, and comfort arrived as food that made her feel worse afterward. Sana thought her problem was food. It was. Her problem was structure. So she built a system around the most dangerous time, the evening. She didn't wait for herself to be strong at night. She became strategic. She prepared a simple dinner plan ahead of time. She made sure the kitchen was cleaned right after dinner, not later. She created a rule: after dinner, tea and a walk for 10 minutes. Then a shower, then a book, and the phone stayed outside the bedroom. At first she still craved the old comfort, but now she had a new routine that offered a different kind of relief. Not the relief of numbing, but the relief of control. And something else happened. Because she planned the evening, her day felt less chaotic. Because she planned the evening, she slept better. Because she slept better, her mornings improved. Suddenly, the whole system stabilized. This is what discipline looks like when it's smart. It doesn't rely on heroic strength at the worst time. It rearranges the environment so the best choice is the easiest choice. That's friction control again, but deeper. It's not just laying out clothes, it's shaping the hours that shape you. Now let's talk about environment, because environment is either your ally or your enemy. People love to talk about mindset. Mindset matters. But if your environment is built to tempt you, your mindset will be in a constant fight. And constant fights wear you down. Your environment includes your physical space, your digital space, and your social space. Physical space. If your home is cluttered, your mind is noisy. If your workspace is full of distractions, your focus will be fragile. You don't need perfection. You need a dedicated zone for your discipline. A chair, a desk, a corner, a table, a place that means work. When you sit there, you don't scroll, you don't snack, you don't wander, you work. Digital space. Your phone is not neutral. Your phone is a casino in your pocket. It is designed to hijack attention. If you want discipline, you need boundaries. One of the most powerful moves you can make is creating two phone modes. One mode is for work and growth. The other mode is for leisure. And the leisure mode is not available until the work mode is completed. This turns your phone from a master into a tool. Social space. The people around you shape your standards more than you want to admit. If you spend time with people who normalize quitting, they will make your discipline feel extreme. If you spend time with people who normalize growth, they will make your excuses feel obvious. This does not mean you abandon everyone. It means you are selective about your influence. You don't need permission to change, but you do need protection from voices that pull you backward. Now, there is a moment in every 6-month discipline journey where the novelty dies. It happens around weeks 3 to 6 for many people. The excitement fades. The results are not dramatic yet. The work feels repetitive. This is where most people stop, so your system must include a way to survive the boring middle. The boring middle is where champions are made. When a sculptor carves stone, the first few strikes feel exciting. The shape begins to appear, but most of the work is thousands of strikes that look the same. Dust, noise, slow progress. The sculptor doesn't stop because the work is repetitive. The sculptor continues because the vision is clear. You need that same relationship with the work, not romance, respect. There are two things that keep you moving through the boring middle: a schedule and a reason. A schedule means you decide in advance. You don't wake up and ask what you feel like doing. You wake up and execute the plan. A reason means you remember what's at stake, not just what you want, but what you refuse to accept anymore. And here's where I want to be direct. If your reason is weak, you will quit. If your schedule is loose, you will negotiate. If your environment is tempting, you will surrender. Discipline is not a mystery, it's math. Now let's talk about time, because time is the excuse that wears the best disguise. People say they don't have time, but what they often mean is they don't have control. They don't have boundaries. They don't have a plan for their attention. Time does not magically appear. Time is claimed. And claiming time requires a principle. Your future deserves a protected appointment. If you don't schedule your discipline, your day will schedule your distractions. So you need two protected time blocks. Not huge, not dramatic, two blocks. The first is a start of day block, even if it's 15 minutes. A block that belongs to you before the world starts pulling you. This could be movement, journaling, reading, prayer, meditation, planning, or studying. The purpose is not to complete everything. The purpose is to start with control. The second is an end-of-day block. Again, even if it's 15 minutes. A block that closes the day with intention instead of collapse. This could be stretching, preparing for tomorrow, tidying, reviewing finances, reading, or reflecting. These two blocks create a frame. When the day has a frame, it stops leaking. Now maybe your schedule is chaotic, maybe you work shifts, maybe you have kids, good. You can still have a frame. Your frame might move, but it exists. The disciplined person doesn't need perfect conditions. The disciplined person creates a standard that adapts. Now let's confront a deeper issue: self-sabotage. Self-sabotage isn't just laziness. It's often fear in disguise. Fear of failing, fear of succeeding, fear of changing, fear of losing the old identity, fear of what people will think. Sometimes people sabotage because struggle is familiar. Struggle is home. Even if it hurts, it's predictable. Growth is unfamiliar. Growth is a new country. It requires new language, new behaviors, new friends, new routines. And the mind resists unfamiliar territory. So when you start becoming disciplined, your mind might create drama. It might create problems that didn't exist before. It might pick fights. It might suddenly feel exhausted. It might suddenly crave chaos. That's not random. That's the old identity trying to survive. This is why your system must be stronger than your feelings. Your system must be automatic. Here's a method that works when self-sabotage appears. Name the voice. When you hear the excuse, don't merge with it. Don't treat it like truth. Treat it like a character, the negotiator, the comfort king, the doubter, the drifter, whatever you want to call it. When the voice says, skip today, you respond, that's the negotiator talking. When the voice says, it won't matter, you respond, that's the drifter talking. Naming creates distance. Distance creates choice. Choice creates discipline. Then you return to the system. Trigger, action, reward, scoreboard. This is not about being harsh. It's about being awake. If you're asleep, your habits run your life. If you're awake, you run your habits. Now there's a crucial concept that will make 6 months feel doable instead of crushing. The concept of seasons. A season of discipline is not a season of constant maximum output. It is a season of consistent minimum standards with strategic peaks. Some weeks will be heavier. Some weeks will be lighter, but the standard stays. This is how professionals operate. A professional doesn't quit because the day is hard. A professional adjusts the load and keeps the practice. So what does that look like for you? It means you decide your minimum viable day. The day when life hits you and you can't do the full routine, but you can still do something that keeps your identity intact. For example, your minimum viable day might be 10 minutes of movement, 10 minutes of reading, and one small action for your future. Or it might be a short walk, a simple meal plan, and journaling 3 sentences. Or it might be one focused work sprint of 20 minutes on your skill. The minimum viable day is not a cheat. It's a strategy. It keeps the chain alive because the chain is everything. When people break the chain, they don't just lose a day. They lose momentum. They lose belief. They lose the identity they were building. So protect the chain. Now let's talk about a tool that disciplined people use without even realizing it: commitment devices. A commitment device is something you set up in advance that makes quitting harder. For example, paying for a class in advance, scheduling sessions with a coach, telling a trusted friend your plan and asking them to check in. blocking a time on the calendar that others respect, setting up automatic transfers to savings, keeping unhealthy food out of the house, using app blockers, putting the TV remote away, having gym clothes ready. The point is not to rely on motivation. The point is to make the path of least resistance lead to the right behavior. Discipline loves simplicity. Now you might be thinking, I've tried systems before, I still fell off. That's normal. Systems fail for a few predictable reasons. One, the system was too complex. Too many rules, too many habits, too many goals. It becomes a mental tax. Two, the system depended on perfect days. It didn't include minimum viable days. Three, the system didn't include recovery. People try to grind without rest, burn out, then binge on comfort. Four, the system didn't address the real trigger. For example, someone thinks they need a better meal plan, but what they actually need is better sleep because they overeat when exhausted. So if your system failed before, it's not proof you can't be disciplined. It's proof you need a smarter design. Now I want to take you into the heart of this chapter, the daily cadence that turns discipline into automatic behavior. The daily cadence is made of three moments: the morning, the transition, and the evening. The morning is when you set the tone. It does not need to be long. It needs to be intentional. The transition is the moment between responsibilities, like when you finish work. This is where people collapse into distractions. If you don't control the transition, the day controls you. The evening is where you recover and prepare. This is where tomorrow is made. Let's build a sample cadence through a story. A teacher named Rohan felt like his life was slipping. He had responsibilities all day, and by night he was too drained to improve anything. He wanted to work on a certification that would increase his income, but evenings were a fog. Rohan built a cadence. In the morning, he woke up 20 minutes earlier and sat with a notebook. He wrote the three priorities of the day, not a long list, three. Then he moved his body for 10 minutes, not to become an athlete, to become awake, to signal to his mind that he was in charge. The transition after school was the key. Instead of going home and immediately collapsing into his phone, he stayed at the school library for 30 minutes. Same place, same time, same routine. He studied the certification material before he even entered the home environment where distractions lived. Then in the evening, he had a simple shutdown ritual. He prepared his clothes for tomorrow. He made sure his study materials were ready. He wrote down one win from the day, even if it was small, because wins build belief. Then he slept. He didn't do this perfectly, but he did it consistently, and over months his fog lifted. Not because life became easier, but because he created a path through it. That's what you need. A path. The path is not complicated, but it must be real. It must match your life. Now, in the middle of building any system, a certain kind of resistance appears. It is the resistance of "I don't feel like it," and it can be persuasive. So let's talk about the relationship between feelings and action. Most people treat feelings like commands. If they feel tired, they rest. If they feel unmotivated, they wait. If they feel stressed, they escape. If they feel bored, they distract themselves. A disciplined person treats feelings like data, not commands, data. Tiredness might mean you need sleep, or it might mean you're avoiding effort. Stress might mean you need to solve a problem, or it might mean you're consuming too much. Boredom might mean you need challenge, or it might mean you're addicted to stimulation. The disciplined person doesn't ignore feelings. The disciplined person interprets them. But even when feelings are real, you don't surrender your standards. You adjust intelligently. If you are exhausted, you don't skip movement. You do the minimum viable day. If you are overwhelmed, you don't quit learning. You do one focused sprint. If you are stressed, you don't numb. You walk, breathe, journal, and then return to the plan. Feelings are weather. Discipline is the engine. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. Now we go even deeper because a strong system does more than produce habits. A strong system produces self-command. Self-command is the ability to direct yourself without drama. It is the ability to say, this is what we do, and then do it. It is quiet power, and self-command is not built by waiting for confidence. It is built by obeying yourself. There is a phrase that disciplined people live by, whether they say it out loud or not. Act like the person you want to become. That doesn't mean pretending, it means practicing. The future identity is not a fantasy, it's a rehearsal. If the person you want to become wakes early, you practice waking early. If the person you want to become trains consistently, you practice training consistently. If the person you want to become saves money, you practice saving money. If the person you want to become is calm under pressure, you practice calm under pressure. Practice is not glamorous. It is repetition. It is refinement. Now I want to talk about a dangerous misunderstanding, the idea that discipline means doing more. Sometimes discipline means doing less, but doing it consistently. Many people overwhelm themselves with an unrealistic routine. They think suffering equals progress. They try to work out 2 hours a day, meditate for an hour, study for 3 hours, and sleep perfectly while also handling life. They last a week or two, then collapse. Then they believe discipline is impossible. That's not discipline. That's a burst. Discipline is choosing a sustainable pace and refusing to stop. The question is not how much can I do today? The question is what can I do daily for 6 months without breaking? Because 6 months of steady work beats 2 weeks of intensity every time. So here's a principle: under promise, over execute. Choose a routine that feels almost too easy. Then do it every day. After you prove consistency, increase the load. This builds trust. Remember the trust bank. Every day you show up, you deposit trust. After weeks of deposits, you have confidence you can spend. But if you keep over-promising and under-delivering, you become a liar to yourself. And once you believe your own words mean nothing, discipline becomes nearly impossible. So stop making dramatic promises. Make small promises and keep them. Now let's talk about the discipline of attention. In the modern world, your attention is under attack. Every app, every platform, every notification is designed to pull you away from the work that would change your life. And if you don't build discipline around your attention, you can be busy all day and still accomplish nothing meaningful. Attention discipline begins with one practice: focus blocks. A focus block is a period of time where you do one thing with full presence without multitasking. Start small: 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Set a timer. Put the phone away. Close extra tabs. Tell yourself you will not switch tasks until the timer ends. This is not just productivity. This is mental training. You are teaching your mind to tolerate stillness and effort. Many people can't focus because their mind is addicted to novelty. They need constant stimulation. Focus feels uncomfortable because it is unfamiliar. But 6 months of discipline can change that. You can rebuild your attention span like you rebuild muscle. Here is how. You use progressive overload. Just like lifting weights, you increase the challenge gradually. If you can focus for 20 minutes today, do 20 minutes. Then next week, increase to 25, then 30, then 45. Over months, your mind becomes a weapon. And when your mind becomes a weapon, you can build anything. Now I want to talk about pain because discipline is not painless. There is pain of discipline and there is pain of regret. The pain of discipline is temporary and purposeful. The pain of regret is permanent and corrosive. But here's the nuance. Discipline pain should be clean. It should be the clean pain of effort. It should not be the dirty pain of chaos, guilt, and self-hate. Clean pain says, this is hard and I'm doing it anyway. Dirty pain says, I'm doing everything wrong, I'm behind, I'm not enough. Dirty pain drains you. Clean pain strengthens you. So part of your system is emotional discipline, not emotional suppression, emotional discipline. Emotional discipline means you don't let a bad mood become a bad day. You don't let a bad day become a bad week. You don't let a setback become a surrender. Emotional discipline means you speak to yourself like a leader speaks to a team. Direct, honest, encouraging without being soft. When you want to quit, you don't insult yourself. You command yourself. You say, we're doing the minimum today. We're keeping the chain. This is how you stay in the game. Now let's address something that will test you in this 6-month season, the delayed reward. At first, discipline feels like work with no payoff. That's why people quit. They don't see the return quickly enough. So you need to create short-term rewards that point toward long-term results. One powerful technique is the weekly review. Once a week at the same time, you sit down and review your scoreboard. You look at what you completed. You look at what you missed. You identify patterns. You adjust the system. The weekly review is where you become your own coach. When you coach yourself weekly, you stop repeating the same mistakes for months. For example, if you notice you always fail on Wednesdays, you ask why. Is Wednesday overloaded? Are you skipping sleep? Are you not eating enough? Are you taking on too many obligations? Then you adjust. You lighten the load on Wednesday. You plan a minimum day. You protect your schedule. This is discipline with intelligence. Now I want to talk about standards again, but this time in a way that might sting. Your standards are revealed by what you tolerate. If you tolerate a messy environment, you tolerate mental noise. If you tolerate staying up late scrolling, you tolerate being tired. If you tolerate spending impulsively, you tolerate future stress. If you tolerate relationships that drain you, you tolerate mediocrity. If you tolerate skipping the work, you tolerate the old life. Raising standards doesn't mean becoming harsh. It means becoming clear. It means you decide what you do not do anymore. There is power in refusal. A disciplined person refuses to bargain with the standard. Think about a person who decides they do not smoke. They don't decide every day. They decided once. They refuse. That decision creates freedom because it removes daily debate. You need the same refusal in your discipline. Refuse to have 0 days. Refuse to miss twice. Refuse to negotiate with the launch ritual. Refuse to let the phone steal your mornings. Refuse to let comfort rule your evenings. Refusal is a form of self-respect. Now, I want to bring back Lena because her journey is a thread through this season. In month 1, she built anchors. In month 2, her system was tested by the boring middle and emotional turbulence. The difference this time was that she had structure. She created a small notebook she called her command book. It had her 3 anchors, her minimum viable day, her launch rituals, and her 2-day rule. It wasn't fancy, it was clear. When she felt herself slipping, she didn't spiral. She opened the command book and executed the smallest step. That's what systems do. They remove drama. In the past, when she fell off, she would disappear for weeks. She would feel ashamed, avoid mirrors, avoid friends, avoid routines. Now she returned quickly. She kept the chain. And around the end of month 2, she noticed something subtle but huge. She was less afraid of hard days. She wasn't confident because life became easy. She was confident because she had proof she could handle difficulty without quitting. That is the real reward of discipline. Not the body change, not the money, not the praise. The reward is self-command. Now I want to help you design a system for your specific 6-month contract without drowning you in complexity. You need a morning protocol, a work protocol, and an evening protocol. Morning protocol, a short sequence that starts your day with intention. It could be as simple as water, movement, and planning. The point is you do something before the world takes you. Work protocol, a way to protect focus and reduce distraction. This could mean scheduling one focus block for your most important task, turning off notifications, batching messages, and taking short breaks that refresh you instead of numbing you. Evening protocol, a shutdown ritual that prepares tomorrow and protects sleep. The evening protocol is where you win the next day in advance. If you do nothing else, build these 3. Now, there's another concept that can transform your 6 months, the idea of identity votes. Every disciplined action is a vote for the person you want to become. Every undisciplined action is a vote for the person you are trying to leave behind. You don't need to win every vote, but you need to win most of them. If you vote for discipline 5 days a week, you will change. If you vote for discipline 10 times a day in small ways, you will change faster than you can imagine. So stop waiting for a grand transformation. Start collecting votes. Wake up on time, vote for discipline. Move your body, vote for health. Study your skill, vote for your future. Track your spending, vote for stability. Go to bed on time, vote for clarity. Votes become identity. Identity becomes destiny. Now let's talk about the moments that break people, unexpected stress. Stress will happen, a family issue, a financial surprise, a conflict at work, a health scare, a bad week. Life will test you. Your system needs a stress protocol. A stress protocol is what you do when life hits. Here is a simple stress protocol that disciplined people use. Reduce the load, keep the anchors, protect sleep. Reduce the load means you temporarily lower expectations in the non-essential areas. You don't try to be perfect. You don't try to do everything. You focus on what matters. Keep the anchors means you maintain the minimum viable day. You keep movement, you keep mental clarity, and you keep one action for your future. Protect sleep means you refuse to sacrifice recovery. Sleep is not optional during stress. It is the foundation that keeps you from collapsing. This protocol is what keeps you from turning a hard week into a hard month. Now I want to address the temptation to quit when you don't see results fast. Results often show up late because growth happens beneath the surface first. A bamboo plant can spend years building a root system before it shoots up rapidly. People look at sudden success and think it's overnight. It's not, it's roots. Your 6 months of discipline is root building. At first, you might not see the changes, but your nervous system is changing. Your attention is changing. Your habits are changing. Your identity is changing. Then one day it becomes visible. Your body changes. Your bank account changes, your career changes, your energy changes, and people will call it luck. Let them, you will know it was discipline. Now, before we close this chapter, I want to give you a mental image to carry into the next stage. Imagine you are forging a blade. A blade is not made by gentle treatment. It is heated, hammered, folded, and tempered. The hammering is not punishment. It is shaping. The heat is not destruction. It is preparation. The tempering is not weakness. It is making the blade resilient. Your 6 months of discipline will heat you. It will hammer you. It will test you. And if you follow your system, it will temper you into someone who does not bend under pressure. Not because you became cold, because you became strong. So as you step forward from this chapter, let your mind settle on the real work. What is your minimum viable day that keeps the chain alive no matter what? What launch ritual will you use to defeat the resistance before it starts? What part of your environment needs to change so the right choice becomes the easy choice? And what standard will you refuse to negotiate with for the next 6 months, even when the weather inside your mind turns against you? Chapter 3. The boring days that build legends. You've already stepped into the 6-month contract, and you've seen that the battle isn't about effort as much as it's about ending negotiation. You also learned that when feelings rise and fall, your system keeps moving using triggers, minimum standards, and the rule that you don't miss twice. Now we enter the part most people never survive, the stretch where nothing feels exciting and everything that matters is decided in silence. There is a day coming, if it hasn't arrived already, when you will wake up and feel nothing. No fire, no urgency, no inspiration. The work will look plain. The payoff will feel far away. Your mind will offer a deal that sounds mature and reasonable. Take it easy today. You've been doing well. You can push tomorrow. That deal is the trap. It is the same trap dressed up in new clothes. This is where discipline stops being a project and starts being a character trait. Most people think the most dangerous days are the hardest days. They're not. The most dangerous days are the ordinary ones. The days where nothing dramatic happened, where you're not in crisis, where you're not excited, where you're just living. Those days decide whether your system is real or just a phase. Imagine a man building a stone wall by hand. Not a wall you throw together in a weekend, but a wall meant to stand for decades. The first stones are exciting because the wall begins to exist. Then comes the long stretch where each stone looks like the last. Lift, place, adjust, step back, repeat. The work is heavy and the progress is slow. Nobody stops to admire stone number 73. But if stone number 73 is sloppy, the whole wall weakens. The builder's pride isn't in the applause. It's in the integrity of the structure. Your life is that wall. The boring days are the stones nobody claps for. They are also the stones that determine whether your future holds. So this chapter is about becoming dangerous in the quiet. It's about doing the work when it's not fun. It's about closing the gap between the person you respect and the person you've been tolerating. And it's about learning to treat your own standards like law. The disciplined person has a different relationship with boredom. They don't see boredom as a signal to stop. They see boredom as a signal that the work is becoming normal. And normal is the goal. You don't want discipline to feel like a heroic event. You want discipline to feel like brushing your teeth. Automatic, non-negotiable, just what you do. But there's a problem. Your brain is not designed for long stretches of unexciting effort. It craves novelty. It craves stimulation. It craves quick reward. That means when you commit to consistent habits, your mind might complain. It might call the work pointless. It might create cravings for distractions. It might look for drama. This is not you failing. This is your mind adjusting to a new order. Your job is to stay calm and keep the chain. The chain is not just the habit. The chain is the agreement between you and the person you want to become. Every day you keep it, you reinforce that agreement. Every day you break it, you weaken it. Now let's talk about one of the most misunderstood parts of discipline: intensity. A lot of people chase intensity because it feels like progress. They want to sweat harder, work longer, suffer more because it proves they're serious. But intensity is not the same as consistency. Intensity is a weapon you use sometimes. Consistency is a foundation you stand on always. In this 6-month season, your goal is not to be intense every day. Your goal is to be consistent every day and smart enough to increase intensity when the system can handle it. That's how you avoid the cycle of overdoing and collapsing. Here is what that looks like in real life. A chef wants to master cooking. At first, they try to learn everything, every cuisine, every technique, every new recipe they see. They jump from one to another and they remain a beginner in all of them. Then a mentor tells them something simple: choose one knife skill and practice it daily. Not for hours, for a few focused minutes. And practice it the same way each time with full attention. That chef's hands change. The mind changes. The movement becomes precise. The confidence becomes real. Mastery is built in repetition, not variety. Your discipline works the same way. The boring days are where your hands become steady. Now the hardest part is that boring days don't reward you emotionally. You might finish a workout and feel nothing. You might study and still feel behind. You might eat clean and still not see the mirror change. You might track your money and still feel pressure. That is normal. Your system is working even when your emotions don't applaud it. You need to learn to trust the process without needing to feel inspired by it. This is where many people get trapped in a childish pattern. They demand to feel good before they do good. That is not freedom. That is slavery to mood. The disciplined person flips it. They do good and then the feeling follows. Not always immediately, but reliably over time. Now I want to give you a concept that will change the way you experience these boring days: the idea of quiet wins. A quiet win is a win that nobody sees. It might not even feel impressive, but it is the exact thing that builds your identity. A quiet win is getting up when you said you would, even if you're tired. A quiet win is doing your minimum standard instead of doing nothing. A quiet win is shutting your phone off and sitting with your work. A quiet win is choosing food that supports you, not food that sedates you. A quiet win is going to bed on time when you want to escape into scrolling. Quiet wins accumulate into a life that looks like confidence from the outside but feels like self-respect on the inside. Here's a story that makes this concrete. There was a woman named Myra who had a habit of starting strong and fading. She would clean up her routine, get excited, post about it, and then disappear. Every time she disappeared, her self-trust dropped. She stopped believing she could change, even though she desperately wanted to. This time she made a different decision. She decided to become invisible, not socially invisible, ego invisible. She stopped telling people what she was going to do. She stopped announcing goals. She stopped chasing validation. She started chasing quiet wins. Every morning she did the first part of her protocol. Every day she kept her chain. If she couldn't do the full version, she did the minimum standard and wrote it down. She treated those entries like gold, not because they were impressive, but because they were proof. At the end of each week, she looked at her scoreboard and saw something she had never seen before: reliability. Then the results started showing up, not just physical changes, something deeper. She spoke differently. She carried herself differently. She stopped begging the world for confidence because she was building it privately. That's what happens when you stop performing discipline and start living it. So here's the question. Are you trying to impress people with your transformation, or are you trying to transform? Because those are different games, and the second one requires you to love quiet progress. Now we need to talk about the moment when the old identity fights back. When you stop living by comfort, comfort doesn't just leave quietly. It sends offers. It sends memories. It sends cravings. It sends thoughts like, "What's the point? You deserve a break. You can do this later." This is where you must become extremely clear about your identity. You are not someone who is trying to be disciplined. You are someone who keeps your word. That is the identity that survives the boring days, and keeping your word is not a feeling. It is an action. It is a choice. So when the mind offers the old deal, you don't debate it. You execute the smallest step of your system. You launch, you move, you begin. Because starting is the gate. Once you start, you've already beaten the voice that tries to stop you. Now let's talk about the hardest kind of boredom, boredom inside progress. This is the boredom of improvement. You might be reading, studying, training, working, and you still feel like you're not moving fast enough. You might feel like everyone else is ahead. You might feel like 6 months won't be enough. You might feel like you're late. That thought is poison. It turns effort into pressure and pressure into quitting. You need a different mental posture, patience with intensity. Patience with intensity means you work hard today, but you don't demand the harvest today. You show up with urgency, but you don't panic. You move forward, but you don't rush yourself into sloppy decisions. This posture protects you from the trap of comparison, because comparison makes you forget your contract. Your contract is not to beat someone else's timeline. Your contract is to keep your word for 6 months. That's all. 6 months of discipline is not about winning a race. It's about becoming the kind of person who finishes what they start. Now, to make that real, you need a practice that turns boredom into clarity. That practice is perspective. Perspective is remembering why you started and what happens if you stop. Not in a dramatic way, in a sober way. If you stop moving, your life doesn't stay the same. It slides backward because the world keeps moving. Skills decay. Health decays. Confidence decays. Opportunities decay. You don't get punished for quitting. You simply lose the future you could have built. So on boring days, you do not ask yourself, "Do I feel like it?" You ask yourself, "What does my future deserve?" And then you execute. Now I want you to understand something about discipline that most people never learn. Discipline is not just what you do. Discipline is what you don't do. It's not only the workout. It's also the refusal to binge on distractions afterward. It's not only the study session. It's also the refusal to multitask and dilute it. It's not only the budget. It's also the refusal to make impulsive purchases that steal from your future. It's not only the sleep schedule. It's also the refusal to trade tomorrow's energy for tonight's stimulation. This is why discipline feels like a battle sometimes. It is not just adding habits. It is subtracting sabotage. So here is a powerful move for your next phase. Identify your biggest leak. A leak is the behavior that drains the most energy, time, or self-respect. For some people, it's late-night scrolling. For some, it's overeating in stress. For some, it's procrastination disguised as research. For some, it's spending to feel better. For some, it's saying yes to everyone. Your leak is where your discipline disappears. And you don't fix leaks by trying harder. You fix leaks by designing boundaries. If your leak is late night scrolling, your boundary might be the phone outside the bedroom and a fixed shutdown time. If your leak is stress eating, your boundary might be a simple evening routine that replaces it with movement and preparation. If your leak is procrastination, your boundary might be a timer and a rule that you start before you consume anything else. The leak is not a moral failure. It is a system failure. Fix it like an engineer. Now let's talk about what happens when you keep showing up on boring days. Your mind begins to change in a way that feels almost magical. The work becomes less dramatic. Your resistance decreases. Your attention strengthens. Your self-respect grows. Your stress tolerance improves. This is what people call mental toughness. But mental toughness is not aggression. It's reliability under discomfort. It's the ability to hold your standard when your body wants comfort. It's the ability to do the minimum standard when you want to do nothing. It's the ability to return quickly when you slip. And mental toughness is built on boring days. Now I want to introduce a powerful psychological shift you must make in this 6-month season. You must stop treating discipline as a punishment and start treating it as a privilege. A privilege is something you're grateful to be able to do. You have the privilege to train your body. You have the privilege to learn. You have the privilege to build income. You have the privilege to change. Many people don't have the health, time, or opportunity. You do. When you see it as privilege, the work becomes less heavy. It becomes purposeful. This doesn't mean you pretend it's always easy. It means you remember that you chose this contract because you wanted your life to be different. Now, we need to talk about the moment you're tempted to quit because you're tired. There are two kinds of tired. One is physical tired. The body needs rest. The other is emotional tired. The mind is trying to escape. A disciplined person learns to tell the difference. If you're physically tired, you respect recovery while keeping the chain. You reduce the load. You do the minimum standard. You sleep. You nourish. You recover. If you're emotionally tired, you don't feed the escape. You don't numb. You don't drift. You do one small action that proves you are still in control, because emotional tiredness often comes from avoidance. And avoidance makes you weaker. Action makes you stronger. So on days you feel drained, you ask yourself a direct question internally. What kind of tired is this? Then you respond with intelligence. This is the maturity of discipline. Now let's revisit a concept without repeating it. The reason you can survive 6 months is because you're not relying on giant bursts. You're relying on your minimum standard and your refusal to miss twice. Those two ideas make you nearly unbreakable. Because even if you have a bad day, you don't have a bad week. Even if you have a bad week, you don't have a bad month because you return. Now I want to take you into a different kind of story, one that shows what happens when boredom is embraced. There was a man named Khalid who decided to change his financial life. Not through luck, not through a sudden windfall, but through discipline. He was tired of anxiety every time an unexpected expense appeared. He was tired of pretending he was fine. He was tired of having dreams that required money while his habits destroyed money. He started tracking every purchase. At first, it was annoying. It felt small. It didn't feel like progress. Then he noticed patterns. He noticed how often he spent because he was bored. He noticed how often he bought things to reward himself after stress. He noticed how many tiny purchases added up to a massive leak. He built a new routine. He planned his purchases. He created a simple budget. He set automatic transfers. He gave himself a controlled allowance for enjoyment so he didn't feel deprived. And he kept tracking. Nothing dramatic happened in week 1. Nothing dramatic happened in week 2. But by month 2, something shifted. The anxiety began to fade. By month 4, he had a cushion. By month 6, he had options. The money was important, but the real win was this: he stopped being afraid of his own life. That is what discipline buys you. It buys you breathing room. And breathing room is freedom. Now here is a truth you need to accept to survive the boring days. Your life will try to pull you back into the old default. Not because you're cursed, because defaults are powerful. If your default is comfort, you will drift toward comfort unless you actively maintain the new standard. So treat your system like maintenance, not like a one-time build. A car doesn't run forever just because you bought it. It needs regular maintenance. Your discipline is the same. You need to review, adjust, reinforce, and protect it. This is why you should decide now. Boredom does not mean stop. Boredom means continue. Now, a lot of people ask for secrets, hacks, shortcuts. Here is the closest thing to a shortcut in discipline: preparation. Preparation is doing the work ahead of time so the moment of choice is easy. Preparation is your meals planned. Preparation is your workout gear ready. Preparation is your study materials set. Preparation is your schedule protected. Preparation is your environment arranged. Preparation reduces friction. Reduced friction increases consistency. Increased consistency produces results. This is not exciting. It is effective. Now let's talk about self-talk, because your inner voice can either support your system or sabotage it. On boring days, your inner voice might say, "This doesn't matter." You need a better script. You need a script that is short, direct, and repeatable. A disciplined script sounds like this internally. This is what I do. I keep my word. Start small, finish strong. Minimum today, momentum tomorrow. No 0 days. Your words matter because your words direct attention, and attention directs behavior. But remember, words without action are noise. The script exists to push you into motion, not to replace motion. Now let's talk about pride. There is a kind of pride that destroys discipline and a kind of pride that builds it. Destructive pride says, "I should be able to do the full routine, so if I can't, I'll do nothing." That pride is a trap. It turns a hard day into a broken chain. Constructive pride says, "I am the kind of person who keeps the chain even if the day is messy." That pride saves you. So choose the pride that protects consistency. Now I want to bring you back to the frozen lake for a moment without reliving it. The point wasn't the ice. The point was the decision halfway across, the moment where turning back feels easier. In this chapter, that moment happens on a normal Tuesday. It happens when nobody is watching. It happens when you could drift without immediate consequence. That is when you prove who you are. And here's what I want you to understand deeply. You don't need to feel strong to be strong. You need to act strong. Strength is an action repeated until it becomes your identity. Now the last part of this chapter is about a shift that separates people who change from people who repeat. You must stop thinking of discipline as something you borrow and start thinking of it as something you own. Borrowed discipline is when you do well because the mood is good, the circumstances are supportive, and life is calm. Own discipline is when you keep your word because you decided it matters, even if everything else is messy. Own discipline is calm. It's not dramatic. It's not emotional. It's steady. And own discipline is exactly what 6 months can give you if you stop trying to feel like a disciplined person and start acting like one daily. So here's the commitment you make on boring days. I will not search for excitement to justify my effort. I will use effort to earn my future. You don't need a new plan every week. You need a deeper standard. You don't need to reinvent yourself every Monday. You need to keep your word on Wednesday. You don't need to impress anyone. You need to become reliable to yourself. If you can do that, 6 months will not just change your results. It will change the way you walk through life. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this, leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. Now, let your mind settle and look straight at the next step of your contract. What is the biggest leak that keeps draining your time, energy, or self-respect? And what boundary will you put around it starting today? When boredom shows up and your emotions go quiet, what will you tell yourself so you begin anyway without debate? And if you could see your life 6 months from now, built stone by stone through ordinary days, what kind of person would you need to be starting tomorrow morning to make that wall unbreakable? Chapter 4. The temptation test. By now you understand that 6 months is a contract you honor in silence, and that the biggest threat is not difficulty, it's negotiation. You've built a system that moves without waiting for mood, and you face the truth that ordinary, boring days are where identity hardens. Now it's time to confront the one force that can hijack all of that in a single moment if you let it: temptation. Temptation is not just a craving for junk food or another hour on your phone. Temptation is any pull toward the easier choice when you know the harder choice builds the life you want. It's the impulse to buy what you can't afford because you want relief. It's the urge to skip what you promised because you want comfort. It's the instinct to numb the moment instead of mastering it. Temptation is the old life trying to protect itself. Most people treat temptation like a surprise attack. They act shocked when it shows up, as if the plan was supposed to be easy now that they decided. But temptation is not a sign that you're failing. Temptation is the test that proves your discipline is real. If you never feel pulled backward, you're not moving forward. Picture a river with a strong current. You can't stand in it and pretend the current isn't there. The current will take you. The only way to cross is to expect the force, brace for it, and move with intention. Temptation is that current. It doesn't care about your goals. It doesn't care about your potential. It cares about the path of least resistance. If you don't plan for it, you will drift. Here's the first rule of the temptation test. You do not fight temptation in your head for long. The longer you debate, the weaker you get. Temptation grows in conversation. It shrinks in action. Your job is not to argue with the urge. Your job is to change your state and move your body. That's why the smallest physical action can save you. Stand up, drink water, walk outside, wash your face, do 10 push-ups. Breathe slowly for 60 seconds. These things sound too simple, but they work because they interrupt the loop. Temptation loves stillness and mental wandering. It hates decisive movement. Most people lose to temptation because they treat it like a moral problem. They say, I'm weak, I have no discipline, I always mess up. That shame becomes fuel for more temptation because shame wants escape. The disciplined person treats temptation like weather, not personal, not emotional, predictable. Weather doesn't require drama. It requires preparation. So you prepare. The second rule of the temptation test is this: Eliminate what you can, manage what you can't. Some temptations are optional. You can remove them. If you're serious about 6 months, stop keeping traps in your environment and acting surprised when you fall in. If your phone destroys your mornings, it doesn't belong near your bed. If late-night scrolling ruins your sleep, the charger belongs outside the bedroom. If certain foods trigger a spiral, don't stock them in your home. If certain apps steal your attention, remove them during this season. You're not being extreme. You're being intelligent. Other temptations you can't remove. Stress will happen. People will disappoint you. Work will overwhelm you. You can't delete life. So you learn to manage the urges that come with it. Managing temptation starts with a simple truth. An urge is not an order. It is a sensation. It rises, it peaks, and it falls. It feels permanent in the moment, but it's temporary. The mistake is believing the urge will last forever unless you give in. It won't. It will pass if you allow it to pass. Think of an urge like a wave. If you panic, you flail and the wave knocks you down. If you stay calm, you ride it until it fades. You don't have to like the feeling. You just have to survive it without surrender. Now let's make this practical. When temptation hits, you need a script and a procedure, not a motivational speech. A procedure. Here's a procedure that disciplined people use even if they've never named it. First, name the temptation clearly. Not vaguely, not emotionally, clearly. I want to scroll, I want to snack, I want to skip, I want to spend. Clarity removes the fog. Second, pause for 10 minutes. 10 minutes is long enough for the wave to weaken and short enough that your mind won't panic. Tell yourself you can still choose after 10 minutes, but you are not choosing now. Third, change your state. Move your body, change your environment, or shift your attention with something constructive. Walk, stretch, clean a small area, open your notes. Do your launch ritual for the habit you're avoiding. The point is to replace the urge with motion. Fourth, return to the standard, not perfectly, not heroically. Simply. This procedure is not about being rigid. It's about being free. Because freedom is not doing what you want in the moment. Freedom is having the power to choose what serves your future. Now I want to show you how temptation steals months in minutes through a story. A man named Dev had built momentum. He was training, learning a skill, and keeping his spending under control. He felt good, but that's when the trap came. One stressful day at work, his mind wanted relief. His phone offered it instantly. He told himself he would just scroll for a few minutes to unwind. Those few minutes became an hour. The hour became a late night. The late night became a short sleep. The short sleep became a lazy morning. The lazy morning became skipping the workout. Skipping the workout became feeling guilty. Feeling guilty became eating poorly for comfort. Eating poorly became feeling sluggish. Feeling sluggish became another day of low output. And suddenly, the system wasn't broken by a major event. It was broken by a small indulgence that triggered a cascade. Dev didn't need more discipline as a personality trait. He needed a boundary at the first domino. This is how temptation works. It rarely asks you to destroy your whole life. It asks you to relax your standard just a little. It whispers it's not that serious. But your life is built from small standards, not big speeches. When you relax the standard consistently, you don't stay the same. You drift. So the real skill is learning to protect the first domino. If your first domino is late-night scrolling, you build a shutdown ritual and protect it like it's sacred. If your first domino is skipping the morning routine, you protect the first 15 minutes of the day. If your first domino is emotional spending, you create a rule that purchases happen only after a delay and a review. If your first domino is stress eating, you create an alternative comfort routine that triggers automatically. Discipline is not only doing the right thing, it's preventing the wrong chain from starting. Now let's get even more direct. Temptation is strongest when you're in certain states. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. When you're in those states, your mind seeks quick relief. That's not weakness, that's biology. So if you want to win the temptation test, you don't just tell yourself to be stronger. You stop walking into your worst state unprepared. If you're hungry, you plan meals and keep simple options available. If you're angry, you learn a cool-down practice that stops you from making decisions hot. If you're lonely, you invest in connection that isn't based on distraction. If you're tired, you protect sleep like your future depends on it because it does. A disciplined person doesn't shame themselves for being human. They design their days so humanity doesn't sabotage them. Now, there's another layer of temptation that is more dangerous than cravings. It's identity temptation. Identity temptation is the urge to return to the old story because the old story is familiar. You start improving, and suddenly you feel like an outsider in your own life. You're eating differently. You're waking earlier. You're saying no more often. You're studying while others are relaxing. You feel the gap. And the old identity says, "Who do you think you are?" That voice isn't trying to protect you from failure. It's trying to protect you from change. Because change requires leaving behind a version of yourself that felt safe, even if it was miserable. To pass this test, you must accept something that feels sharp but liberating. You cannot keep the same life and get a different future. If your future requires a new standard, your present must be disturbed. That means you will sometimes feel uncomfortable, misunderstood, and alone in your discipline. That discomfort is not a sign to stop. It's a sign you're crossing a line you've never crossed before. Now let's talk about the social temptation. Social temptation is when people around you pull you back toward your old standard. Not always maliciously. Sometimes they do it because your change forces them to look at their own choices. Sometimes they do it because they miss the version of you that was easier to predict. Sometimes they do it because they're uncomfortable with discipline. They'll say things like, "Relax, don't be so strict." They'll say, "One day won't hurt." They'll tease you. They'll question your goals. They'll try to make you feel extreme. You don't win this by arguing. You win this by being calm and consistent. You don't need their approval. You need your results. And results require boundaries. A boundary is not a fight. A boundary is a decision. For 6 months, you might need to say no to certain invitations, certain routines, certain conversations, certain environments. Not forever, for this season. Because this season is a forge, and a forge requires heat, focus, and protection from distractions that cool the metal before it hardens. Now, I want you to understand how a disciplined person thinks about pleasure, because many people sabotage themselves by swinging between extremes. Some people try to eliminate all pleasure, then they burn out and binge. Others keep chasing pleasure, then they never build anything. Discipline is not the elimination of pleasure. It's the control of pleasure. It's choosing pleasure that restores you instead of pleasure that steals from you. There is a difference between a walk after dinner and a binge that leaves you foggy. There is a difference between a planned treat and an impulsive spiral. There is a difference between an hour of leisure earned and an evening lost. You don't need to live like a machine. You need to live like a leader. A leader chooses. This is why you need a concept I'll call earned comfort. Earned comfort means you don't use comfort to escape the work. You use comfort to recover after the work. Comfort before the work makes you soft. Comfort after the work makes you sustainable. So you build a rule. The reward comes after the standard is met, not because you're punishing yourself, because you're training yourself. Now let's step into one of the hardest temptation tests, the day you feel behind. Feeling behind creates desperation. Desperation makes people abandon the system and start doing random things. They panic. They push too hard. They skip sleep. They try to catch up by burning out. Then they crash and the cycle repeats. The disciplined person doesn't chase. They calibrate. If you feel behind, you return to the fundamentals. Keep the anchors. Keep the chain. Protect sleep. Focus on one high-impact task. Win today, then win tomorrow. Momentum closes the gap, not panic. Now I want to give you a mental image that will help you pass temptation tests for the rest of this season. Imagine you are a pilot and your emotions are the passengers. Some passengers are calm, some are loud, some are frightened, some are impatient. They all have opinions. They all want something. But none of them should be flying the plane. If you let the loudest passenger grab the controls, you crash. Your job is to keep your hands on the controls and keep the plane on course, even when the cabin is noisy. That's what discipline is. You don't silence emotions. You don't pretend they aren't there. You simply don't let them steer. Now let's return to practicality again. You need a temptation plan because temptation is predictable. Your plan is simple. Identify your top 3 temptations for this season. Not everything. 3. For each temptation, create a barrier and an alternative. A barrier makes the temptation harder, the phone out of reach, the app removed, the spending delay rule, the kitchen closed after dinner, the credit card left at home, the TV unplugged, the alcohol not bought, whatever applies to you. An alternative gives you a replacement action that still meets the underlying need. If the need is relief, you choose a walk, a shower, a journal, a breath practice. If the need is stimulation, you choose reading, learning, a project, training. If the need is connection, you choose a call, a message, a planned meetup with someone who supports growth. If the need is celebration, you choose a controlled reward that doesn't sabotage you. Then you practice the plan before you need it, because in the moment of temptation, your mind will not be creative. It will be impulsive. Practice makes the response automatic. Now, I want to challenge the part of you that still thinks discipline is about avoiding failure. Discipline is not about avoiding failure. Discipline is about refusing to abandon yourself. When you pass a temptation test, you're not just avoiding a mistake. You're reinforcing the identity of someone who keeps their word. That identity is everything. Because once you become that person, your habits stop being a struggle. They become alignment. They become natural. They become the path you walk without thinking. But you don't become that person by reading about it. You become that person by surviving temptation one moment at a time. One decision, then another, then another. Now here's a truth that will make the next months easier. Temptation never disappears completely. It changes shape. When you're undisciplined, temptation is obvious. It's the binge, the scroll, the skip, the impulse. When you become disciplined, temptation becomes subtle. It becomes the temptation to get arrogant, the temptation to relax standards too early, the temptation to stop doing the simple things because you think you've graduated. That temptation is deadly because it feels like confidence. So stay humble. Humble discipline means you keep doing the basics even when you're improving. You keep the chain. You keep the minimum standard. You keep the boundaries. You don't start acting like you're above the system. The system got you here. The system keeps you here. And that's the final point of this chapter. Passing the temptation test is not a one-time victory. It's a daily practice. It's a pattern of choosing the future over the moment. 6 months from now, you will not remember every single temptation you resisted, but you will live in the results of resisting them. You will feel stronger, not because life became gentle, but because you became steady. You will feel calmer, not because stress disappeared, but because you learned you don't have to escape it. You will feel proud, not because you were perfect, but because you didn't abandon the contract. And that pride is quiet, clean, and real. So as you move forward, let the next temptation be a signal, not a threat. Let it remind you that you are on the edge of change. Let it remind you that the old life is trying to pull you back because it can feel you leaving. And let it remind you that every time you pause, move, and return to the standard, you are forging the person who can't be bought by comfort. Ask yourself what your first domino is, the one small indulgence that starts the collapse, and what boundary you will place in front of it starting now. Ask yourself what alternative comfort you will practice so relief doesn't come from sabotage. Ask yourself which 3 temptations have stolen the most from you in the past, and what your plan will be the next time they show up, not in theory, but in real time, in your real life. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. Chapter 5. Recovery is a weapon. You've already learned to honor the 6-month contract without negotiating, to let your system move even when your emotions don't cooperate, to respect the quiet, boring days that build real identity, and to treat temptation like a predictable current you prepare for instead of a surprise that knocks you over. Now we go to the part most people ignore until it breaks them: recovery. Not comfort, not drifting. Recovery that sharpens you and keeps you consistent when life presses hard. A lot of people think discipline is only pushing. They think it's always more effort, more grind, more intensity. They romanticize exhaustion like it's proof. Then they burn out and call it a lack of motivation. What actually happened is simpler. They built an engine and never changed the oil. They demanded output without maintenance. They treated their body and mind like machines that don't need care, and then they acted surprised when the system failed. Recovery is not the opposite of discipline. Recovery is part of discipline. Recovery is how you stay in the contract for 6 months instead of quitting in month 2 from sheer fatigue. Recovery is how you avoid turning a hard season into a self-destructive season. Recovery is how you keep your standards high without becoming brittle. Think about a blade again, not while it's being hammered, but after the heat. The blade doesn't become strong only from impact. It becomes strong from tempering. Tempering is controlled cooling, controlled rest, controlled recovery that creates resilience. Without it, the blade can be sharp, but it will snap under pressure. You don't want to be sharp and fragile. You want to be sharp and unbreakable. Most people have been trained to recover through escape. When they feel stress, they reach for stimulation. When they feel tired, they scroll. When they feel lonely, they numb. When they feel overwhelmed, they avoid. That's not recovery, that's sedation. Sedation makes tomorrow harder. Recovery makes tomorrow easier. So here's the distinction that changes everything. Comfort is what you reach for to avoid the work. Recovery is what you choose so you can return to the work stronger. Comfort says, let's forget. Recovery says, let's restore. Comfort says, I don't want to feel this. Recovery says, I can feel it and still lead myself. Comfort is a quick hit. Recovery is a long investment. If you don't learn this difference, 6 months will feel like a prison. If you learn it, 6 months becomes a training ground where you build a body and mind that can handle real pressure without collapsing into old habits. Let's bring this down to real life with a story. There was a man named Nikhil who decided to rebuild his health and career at the same time. He was serious. He set his wake time, started training, and committed to learning a skill every day after work. The first few weeks looked clean. Then life did what life does. Deadlines multiplied. A family responsibility showed up unexpectedly. Sleep got shorter. He started relying on caffeine. He skipped meals, then overate at night. He tried to compensate by pushing harder, and the push turned into a grind. The grind turned into irritability. The irritability turned into frustration. The frustration turned into a night where he said, I'm done, and collapsed into distraction because it felt like relief. Nikhil didn't quit because he lacked discipline. He quit because he didn't know how to recover. His system had no safety valve. So he rebuilt it with one new principle. Recovery is scheduled, not earned through suffering. He stopped waiting for the moment he felt like he deserved rest. He put recovery on the calendar like a non-negotiable appointment, the same way he protected his focus blocks and his routines. He built a rhythm. He trained hard, then he recovered hard. He worked deeply, then he disengaged deliberately. He didn't call it laziness. He called it maintenance. Within weeks, his consistency improved, not because he became more intense, but because he became more sustainable. This is the mindset shift you need. A disciplined life is not only about doing more. It's about doing what matters without breaking yourself. Now, there are 3 layers of recovery you must master in this 6-month season: physical recovery, mental recovery, and emotional recovery. If you ignore any one of them, it will leak into the others. Physical recovery starts with sleep, and there's no way around that. You can try to negotiate with sleep, but sleep always wins eventually, and when it wins, it collects interest. Short sleep makes cravings louder, focus weaker, mood more volatile, and willpower thinner. If you want discipline to feel possible, sleep is not a luxury. It is your foundation. The disciplined person treats sleep like a performance tool, not like a reward. They don't stay up late and then beg themselves to be productive the next day. They protect the shutdown ritual because it protects everything else. When you're tired, you don't just lose energy. You lose judgment. And when you lose judgment, temptation becomes persuasive. Mental recovery is about giving your mind time to decompress without poisoning it. Many people think they're resting when they scroll, but their mind is not resting. It is being fed noise. It is being pulled in 100 directions. It is being trained to crave stimulation. That isn't recovery, that's mental clutter. Real mental recovery is quieter. It might be a walk. It might be reading. It might be journaling. It might be a hobby that keeps your hands busy and your mind calm. It might be a slow routine that signals to your nervous system that the day is safe now. Emotional recovery is learning how to process pressure without escaping into self-sabotage. It's learning how to feel disappointment without making it an identity. It's learning how to feel stress without letting it turn into destruction. Emotional recovery often looks like honesty and release, speaking to someone you trust, writing it out, breathing, moving, creating space between the feeling and the reaction. If you don't recover emotionally, you will recover through temptation, and temptation always charges a fee. Now, this chapter is not telling you to slow down your ambition. It's telling you to protect it. Ambition without recovery becomes desperation. Desperation becomes chaos. Chaos becomes quitting. You're not here to quit. You're here to finish 6 months and walk out with a new identity. So let's talk about what recovery looks like as a disciplined practice. First, you need a shutdown ritual that ends your day with intention, not perfection. Intention. Your shutdown ritual might be simple: a quick review of what you completed, setting up tomorrow's first step, tidying a small area, placing the phone away, dimming lights. A consistent signal to your brain that the day is done and recovery begins. The ritual matters because it removes the drift. Drift is where late nights happen. Drift is where the phone steals time. Drift is where you trade tomorrow for a moment that doesn't even satisfy you. The ritual is the door you walk through from effort to rest. Second, you need a weekly recovery block. One block where you reduce intensity on purpose. You still keep the chain, but you lower the load. You move, but you don't crush yourself. You learn, but you don't overload. You take care of your body, your home, your mind. You create order. This block prevents fatigue from stacking until it becomes collapse. Third, you need recovery rules. Rules are what make recovery clean instead of messy. A clean recovery rule might be: I don't scroll in bed. I don't eat after the kitchen is closed. I don't bring my phone into the bathroom. I don't work without breaks for more than a set amount of time. I don't let a stressful day decide my bedtime. These rules are not restrictions. They are boundaries that protect your nervous system. When you protect your nervous system, you protect your discipline. Now, you might be thinking that recovery sounds soft. That's because most people have only seen fake recovery. Fake recovery is avoidance. Fake recovery is indulgence that leaves you weaker. Real recovery is deliberate. Real recovery is responsible. Real recovery is strong because it puts you back on the path the next day with more power, not less. If you're serious about 6 months, you have to stop treating recovery as something you do after you've earned suffering. You recover because you are building a life that requires endurance. Endurance wins this season, not drama. Now there's another place recovery shows up that people don't expect. It shows up right after success. Success can make you careless. You have a good week, you feel confident, and then you relax your standards too early. You tell yourself you've got it now. You skip the basics. You drift. Then you feel confused when you start sliding backward. This is why recovery must include humility. Humility means you keep doing the basics even when you're improving. You don't graduate from fundamentals. You deepen them. The disciplined person does not confuse progress with immunity. So when you have a good streak, you don't celebrate by breaking the contract. You celebrate by recovering in a way that supports the contract. You choose earned comfort that restores you, not indulgence that erases momentum. Now there's a harsh truth that needs to be said clearly. Some people don't fail because they can't work hard. They fail because they can't rest well. They don't know how to sit with themselves without stimulation. They don't know how to be alone without distraction. They don't know how to feel stress without escaping it. So they keep running until they crash and then they disappear. You are not going to be that person. You are going to train the skill of resting without drifting. That is a real skill, and it's one of the strongest forms of discipline. Here's a metaphor that makes it real. Imagine your discipline is a tightrope. Your goal is to cross it for 6 months. Many people think the danger is falling because the rope is thin. But the bigger danger is tension that never releases. If the rope is pulled too tight without relief, it snaps. Recovery is the slack you give strategically so the rope holds. You don't want a life that snaps under pressure. You want a life that holds. Now let's talk about recovery as identity, because identity is the deepest layer of everything in this audiobook. If you're building the identity of someone who keeps their word, recovery becomes part of that word. You're not only keeping your promise to work, you're keeping your promise to protect the machine that does the work. When you go to bed on time, you're not being boring, you're being serious. When you take a walk instead of scrolling, you're not being strict, you're being smart. When you lower the load on a tough day but keep the chain, you're not being weak. You're being consistent. When you say no to stimulation that steals your sleep, you're not missing out. You're investing. Recovery is discipline because it's a decision made in advance. It's another way you stop negotiating with yourself. Now I want to introduce a concept that will protect you when the season gets heavy. Recovery triggers. Just like habits need triggers, recovery needs triggers. Otherwise, you'll forget until you're already burned out, and by then your mind will want the easiest escape. A recovery trigger could be the end of work, the end of dinner, the moment you walk into your home, the moment you put your head on the pillow, the moment you feel the first signs of overload. When the trigger hits, your recovery action begins automatically. This could be 5 minutes of breathing, 10 minutes of walking, a short stretch, a shower. Writing down what's on your mind. Preparing tomorrow's first step, turning off screens. These actions are not dramatic, but they send a message to your nervous system. We are safe now. The work is done. You can recover. And when your nervous system trusts you, discipline becomes easier, because you're not fighting yourself all day and all night. Now, there's one more layer here, and it might be the most important. Recovery includes forgiveness without softness. Forgiveness without softness means you don't punish yourself for slipping, but you also don't excuse yourself into repeating it. You acknowledge what happened. You learn. You return. You don't spiral. You don't dramatize. You don't throw the contract away because of one bad evening. You don't let shame turn into a second mistake. This is what keeps people in the game for 6 months. Because the truth is, you are going to have days where you're not proud. You are going to have moments where you react poorly or waste time or choose comfort. The difference is what happens next. Do you punish yourself and then escape, or do you recover and return? Recovery is how you break the cycle of shame. Shame makes you hide. Hiding makes you repeat. Recovery makes you honest. Honesty makes you adjust. Adjustment makes you grow. Now I want to give you a real-world example that ties recovery to performance. There was a woman named Asha who was building a new skill to change careers. She studied before work, worked all day, then tried to study again at night. She was relentless for 2 weeks, then her focus started collapsing. She would sit at her desk and stare, frustrated, and then she would escape into her phone. She felt guilty and started pushing harder, which made her even more tired. The cycle was predictable. Instead of blaming herself, she changed the design. She built a recovery interval into her evening. When she got home, she didn't open her phone. She changed clothes, took a short walk, ate a simple meal, and did nothing stimulating for 20 minutes. Then she studied for one focused block. Then she shut down. That small recovery interval transformed her output. Her mind wasn't fighting the residue of the day. She wasn't demanding concentration from a mind that was still flooded. She gave herself a bridge from work mode to learning mode. This is the discipline of recovery. It's not just rest, it's timing, it's rhythm. If you learn rhythm, you stop forcing. When you stop forcing, you stop burning out. When you stop burning out, you become consistent. When you become consistent, you win. Now, let's bring this back to your 6-month contract. If you want to change your life in 6 months, you must treat your energy like a resource that needs protection. Not because you're fragile, because you're building something that requires endurance. Discipline is not only the ability to start, it's the ability to continue. And continuation requires recovery. So as you move into the next chapter of your season, hold this line in your mind. Recovery is the part of discipline that keeps discipline alive. You are not building a life that looks good for a week. You are building a life that holds up for years. You are not chasing a moment of intensity. You are building a standard that is sustainable. And that means you will rest with intention, recover with purpose, and return with power. Let the mind get quiet and consider what kind of recovery you've been practicing. Has it been restoration, or has it been sedation that leaves you weaker? What shutdown ritual will you protect so your nights stop leaking into your mornings? What recovery trigger will you install so stress doesn't push you into temptation before you even realize it happened? And what would change in your discipline if you treated sleep, mental quiet, and emotional processing as part of your contract, not optional extras you only reach for after you've already started collapsing? If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. Chapter 6. The new identity takes the wheel. You've already committed to a 6-month contract that doesn't depend on mood. Built a system that runs on defaults. Learn to respect the quiet days that build real strength. Face temptation as a predictable current, and treated recovery as a weapon that keeps you consistent instead of burned out. Now, we move into the phase where the work stops feeling like something you're doing and starts feeling like who you are. This is where your old identity either fades out quietly, or it makes one last serious attempt to pull you back. There's a moment that arrives in every real transformation when you realize the goal was never the goal. The goal was a doorway. You thought you wanted the body, the money, the skill, the confidence, the calm. You do want those. But what you're really building is a person who can be trusted with those things. Because plenty of people get results and lose them. They achieve and then collapse. They win and then self-destruct. Not because they're cursed, but because the identity underneath didn't change. They built a new exterior on an old foundation. 6 months of discipline is the time it takes to pour a new foundation if you stop treating your routines like chores and start treating them like votes for a new identity. You don't do disciplined actions to prove something to other people. You do them to prove something to yourself so consistently that the proof becomes undeniable. And once it's undeniable, you stop asking if you can do it. You already know. This chapter is about that shift, the shift from effort to ownership, the shift from trying to be disciplined to being disciplined, the shift from chasing outcomes to living by standards. Most people don't fail because they don't want it badly enough. They fail because they haven't decided who they are yet. They live with a weak identity that changes depending on mood, convenience, and social pressure. One day they're a builder. The next day they're a drifter. One day they're serious. The next day they're bargaining. That's not because they're broken. That's because their identity is still up for negotiation. If you want the next months to change you permanently, identity cannot be negotiable anymore. Here is the cleanest way to understand identity. Identity is the set of behaviors you defend even when it costs you. Anyone can do something once. Identity is what you protect repeatedly. Identity is what you refuse to betray. So the question becomes simple. What are you refusing to betray in this season? Not in a dramatic speech, in a normal day. When you wake up and your body wants 5 more minutes, what do you refuse to betray? When you're stressed and your mind wants quick relief, what do you refuse to betray? When nobody is watching and the easiest option is right there, what do you refuse to betray? That is identity. Now, the next stage of discipline is not about adding more and more tasks. It's about tightening your standard and widening your capacity. Tightening your standard means the basics become non-negotiable. Widening your capacity means you can handle more pressure without falling apart. This is where people get confused. They think capacity comes from pushing harder every day. Capacity actually comes from consistency, recovery, and controlled intensity. It comes from learning how to apply pressure without losing structure. You've already built the engine and learned not to burn it out. Now you train the driver. The driver is your attention, your decisions, and your self-command. Because the truth is, most people don't lose their discipline in the gym or at work. They lose it in small, unguarded moments. They lose it when they're transitioning, when they're tired, when they're alone, when they're bored, when they're slightly emotional, when they're in between tasks. The old identity lives in those moments. It waits there. It doesn't need to beat you in a fair fight. It just needs you to relax your guard for 5 minutes. So the new identity needs something stronger than motivation. It needs a personal constitution. A personal constitution is a small set of rules that you live by in this season, rules that protect your future without needing constant debate. You already have principles like keeping the chain and refusing to miss twice. Now you choose a few more that fit your life and defend them like they matter, because they do. Here, what a constitution does. It ends the constant decision-making that drains people. It removes the daily question, should I? It replaces it with, I do. When you stop deciding every day, you start winning every day. Think of the people you respect the most. They aren't people with perfect lives. They are people with clear standards. You can predict them, not because they are boring, but because they are consistent. They don't have to be dramatic to be powerful. They are powerful because they don't negotiate with what they believe is right. That's the kind of person you become in 6 months when your standards solidify. Now let's make this real with a story. There was a woman named Farah who had spent years feeling like she was always catching up. She was capable, smart, and hardworking, but she kept leaking time and energy. The problem wasn't that she didn't know what to do. The problem was that she let her day be decided by whatever demanded her attention first. Messages, emergencies, other people's needs, random tasks. By the time she got to what mattered, she was drained and resentful. Then she would escape, tell herself she'd do better tomorrow, and repeat. Farah didn't need a new goal. She needed a new identity, the identity of a person who leads her day. So she built one rule that changed everything. The first hour of the day belongs to her future, not the first hour for everything. The first hour for her future. She didn't check messages. She didn't scroll. She didn't solve other people's problems. She invested in the skills she was building and the body she was training. Some mornings it was more skill, some mornings it was more movement, but the hour belonged to her future. The first week she felt guilty. like she was being selfish. That's the old identity begging to survive. The second week she felt resistance. That's the old identity testing her. By the third week the guilt faded. By the fourth her confidence rose. Not because her life suddenly got easy, but because she proved something to herself. She could protect what mattered. That proof changed how she walked through the day. She stopped feeling like a victim of time. She started feeling like a leader of time. And that feeling did not come from thinking. It came from a non-negotiable standard. Now notice what happened. Farah didn't add 10 habits. She installed one strong rule. That's identity work. Identity work is not complicated. It's just uncompromising where it counts. So here is the next level for you. Pick the few rules that will define who you are for the rest of this season. Rules that match your life and protect your goals without requiring constant willpower. One rule should protect your mornings or your transitions because those are the gates of your day. One rule should protect your body because energy is the fuel of discipline. One rule should protect your focus because attention is the currency of change. One rule should protect your sleep because recovery is what keeps the chain alive. You don't need a long list. You need a small set of laws you actually enforce. Now let's talk about enforcement because this is where people get soft. A rule you don't enforce is not a rule. It's a suggestion. And your old identity loves suggestions because suggestions can be ignored without consequences. You enforce your constitution with consequences and rewards, not emotional drama. The consequence might be simple. If you break your rule, you immediately return to the minimum standard and tighten the environment. If you break the phone boundary, the phone gets moved farther away. If you break the spending rule, you pause non-essential spending for a set period. If you break the bedtime rule, you schedule an earlier shutdown the next night. Not as punishment, but as correction. Correction is what adults do. Drama is what keeps people stuck. Now there's a concept you need to survive the next phase, the plateau. The plateau is when results slow down. You're still working, you're still showing up, but the progress stops being exciting. The scale doesn't move. The skill growth feels slow. The income change isn't visible yet. The energy feels steady instead of dramatic. This is not failure. This is normal. The plateau is where your new identity either deepens or disappears, because the plateau removes the emotional reward. It forces you to work without applause. It forces you to rely on your standard instead of your excitement. The key to the plateau is to stop measuring progress only by outcomes and start measuring progress by adherence. Did you keep the contract today? Did you keep the chain? Did you protect the Constitution? Did you execute the system? That's progress. Outcomes lag behind adherence. Always. If you keep adherence high, outcomes have no choice but to follow. But they follow on their schedule, not yours. So when you hit a plateau, you don't panic and reinvent everything. You review your scoreboard, you refine, and you stay steady. Plateaus are not for quitting. Plateaus are for tightening. Tightening means you look for tiny leaks and seal them. Maybe you've been training, but sleep has slipped. Tighten the shutdown ritual. Maybe you've been studying, but your focus blocks have become sloppy. Tighten the environment and the timer. Maybe your nutrition has been mostly good, but weekends are drifting. Tighten the plan and install a boundary. Maybe your money tracking is consistent, but impulse spending is creeping in under stress. Tighten the stress protocol and install a spending delay. This is how disciplined people keep improving. They don't always push harder. They become more precise. Precision is a form of power. Now, there's another identity trap that shows up here. It's the trap of self-importance. When you start improving, you might start thinking you're above the basics. You might start skipping the simple steps because you feel like you've earned the right to relax them. That feeling is dangerous. It's not confidence. It's carelessness wearing confidence's clothing. The new identity stays humble, it respects fundamentals, it keeps the chain, it protects sleep, it honors recovery, it defends focus, it maintains boundaries, it does not get bored with what works, because what works is often boring, and boring is the price of results. Now let's talk about pressure because identity is revealed under pressure. Pressure is when you're busy, stressed, tired, or emotionally charged. Pressure is when life tests whether your discipline is real or just convenient. The disciplined person does not hope pressure doesn't come. They plan for pressure. They know that when pressure hits, the full routine might not happen, but the minimum standard will happen. The chain stays. The constitution stays. The identity stays. This is what makes you resilient. Not the ability to avoid hard weeks. The ability to stay yourself during hard weeks. The old identity changes when life gets hard. The new identity stays steady. So here is a principle for pressure. When life gets heavy, go back to the basics and make them smaller, not optional. Smaller, not optional. That is how you keep moving without breaking. Now, I want to give you a tool that creates identity fast, the after-action review. At the end of certain days, especially difficult ones, you do a short internal review. Not to shame yourself, to coach yourself. You ask what went well, what almost broke me, what triggered the urge, what boundary needs strengthening. What is the smallest adjustment that prevents this tomorrow? This keeps you learning instead of looping. Most people repeat the same mistakes because they never review them. They just feel guilty and move on. Guilt teaches nothing. Review teaches everything. When you review, you start seeing yourself clearly. You stop being surprised by your own patterns. You stop pretending. And in that honesty, your discipline becomes sharper. Now, identity also requires a new relationship with discomfort. People think discomfort is the enemy. It's not. Discomfort is a signal that you're doing something that matters. If you never feel discomfort, you're not growing. You're repeating. But there's a difference between clean discomfort and dirty discomfort again. Clean discomfort is the discomfort of effort, learning, training, and saying no. Dirty discomfort is the discomfort of chaos, guilt, and avoidance. Your new identity chooses clean discomfort on purpose so you don't live in dirty discomfort by default. Clean discomfort is a controlled burn. Dirty discomfort is a wildfire. So when you feel clean discomfort, don't interpret it as danger. Interpret it as training. This is why the new identity stops asking for ease. It asks for strength. Now let's return to the idea of freedom because that's the real destination. Freedom is not a life where you do whatever you want whenever you want. That's not freedom. That's impulse. Freedom is a life where you can choose, where you are not owned by cravings, distractions, or other people's expectations. Freedom is self-command, and self-command is identity. That's why this chapter matters. Because if you build the identity of someone who keeps their word, your life stops being a series of emotional reactions. It becomes a series of deliberate choices. You stop living in apology. You start living in alignment. Now, here's what happens when identity takes over. Your habits stop being a fight because they stop being optional. You don't debate sleep, you protect it. You don't debate training, you do it. You don't debate focus, You set the environment and execute. You don't debate recovery, you schedule it. You don't debate temptation, you run the procedure. This isn't rigid, it's stable. And stability is what allows you to build something real over 6 months. Now I want you to feel the seriousness of this. If you finish this season with a new identity, you won't need to restart your life every Monday. You won't need to chase motivation. You won't need to rely on hype. You will be the kind of person who does what they said they would do. That is a permanent advantage, because life is full of people with potential. It is rare to find a person with a standard. Be that rare person, not loudly, quietly, daily. You are not trying to win a day. You are trying to become the kind of person who wins most days, and most days are enough to change everything. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. As you move forward into the next stretch of your 6-month contract, what are the few rules you will live by that remove daily negotiation and protect your future automatically? When you hit a plateau and the emotional reward disappears, what will you measure so you stay steady and don't panic? Adherence or outcomes? And when pressure shows up and your routine can't be full size, what minimum standard will you keep so your identity stays intact and you remain the kind of person who does not abandon the contract? Chapter 7. The finish line that starts your life. You've walked through the 6-month contract, learned to end negotiation, built a system that runs on defaults, and discovered that boring days are where real strength is forged. You face temptation as a predictable current instead of a surprise attack, and you stopped confusing sedation with recovery. Then you stepped into the deeper shift where identity takes the wheel and your standards become law. Now we bring it all together, not as ideas, but as a way of living that survives long after this audiobook ends. There's a moment on every long journey when you realize you're not the same person who started. Not because the world changed, but because you did. The same streets look different when you walk them with self-command. The same problems feel lighter when you know you can handle discomfort without collapsing. The same temptations lose their power when you've proven repeatedly that an urge is not an order. And here's the truth about the last chapter of any transformation. There is no finish line that saves you. There is only the moment you decide to keep being the person you became. Most people want a dramatic ending. They want the grand reveal. They want the final scene where everything locks into place and life stays easy forever. That's not real. Real change is quieter. Real change is waking up on an ordinary day and choosing your standard without thinking twice. Real change is looking at your life and realizing the chaos is no longer in charge. 6 months of discipline doesn't just produce results. It produces a spine. A spine is what holds you up when life presses down. A spine is what keeps your direction steady when your emotions shift. A spine is what makes you dependable to yourself. And if you keep that spine, you don't need to restart your life every Monday. You don't need to beg for motivation. You don't need to wait for perfect conditions. You move because moving is who you are. So let's talk about what happens next, because this is where people either lock in their new identity or quietly drift back into the old one. The danger after progress is not failure. The danger is subtle surrender. Subtle surrender is when you say you're still committed, but you start relaxing the boundaries that made commitment possible. You start sleeping later. You start scrolling longer. You start skipping the minimum standard more often. You start letting the old leaks reopen. You start tolerating small excuses. And because it's subtle, you don't feel alarmed. You tell yourself you deserve a little ease. You tell yourself you've earned flexibility. But you don't drift back to the old life in one big decision. You drift back through 100 small permissions. This is why the final lesson of this audiobook is not push harder. The final lesson is protect what you built. Protection is discipline at the highest level. Protection is choosing maintenance over drama. Protection is living like someone who understands that standards are fragile if you treat them casually. You are not fragile. Your standards are. Standards are like fire. A fire can heat a house, but if you stop tending it, it doesn't stay strong because you once lit it. It needs fuel and attention, and the fuel is daily practice. Now, if you've truly absorbed the last 6 chapters, you know the fuel already. You know it's not hype. You know it's anchors. You know it's a system with triggers and scoreboards. You know it's minimum standards that keep the chain alive. You know it's refusing to miss twice. You know it's boundaries that shut down leaks. You know it's recovery that restores instead of sedates. You know it's the Constitution that ends daily debate. You know it's identity that refuses to betray itself. The work now is simple and it's hard. You keep living it, but let's not pretend. Keeping it is its own fight. Because once you rise to a new level, your life changes and your challenges change with it. New responsibilities come. New opportunities come. New pressure comes. And the old you will sometimes show up not as a monster but as a familiar voice offering just this once with a calm smile. So you must become fluent in your own patterns. You must recognize your first domino. You must respect your most dangerous moments. You must lead yourself through them without drama, like a pilot flying through turbulence. Because the measure of your transformation is not what you do on a great day. The measure is what you do on a normal day and what you do when life gets loud. This is where a lot of people misunderstand discipline. They think discipline is winning battles. It's not. Discipline is winning the war by refusing to leave the battlefield. The battlefield is your day. And your day is won in the smallest moments. It's won when you wake up and you don't negotiate. It's won when you begin the launch ritual before your mind builds a case for delay. It's won when you feel the urge and you pause, move, and return to the standard. It's won when you protect the shutdown ritual so tomorrow isn't stolen. It's won when you choose clean discomfort instead of dirty discomfort. It's won when you keep your minimum standard even when you can't do the full routine. It's won when you review instead of spiraling. And those wins don't feel like fireworks. They feel like calm. Calm is the new confidence. Confidence is not loud. Confidence is being able to look at yourself and know you can trust the next decision. Now, I want to bring you back to the image of the frozen lake, not to repeat the story, but to complete it. The person crossing that lake doesn't cross because the ice suddenly feels warm. They cross because they commit to the next step. They cross because going back is not a comfort anymore, it's a trap. They cross because the other side is the life they promised themselves. 6 months of discipline is you crossing. The first step was the contract. The middle was the system, the boring days, the temptation tests, and the recovery that kept you whole. The later stretch was identity taking the wheel. And now you are at the point where the other side is not just a destination. It's a way of living. And here's the most important truth in the entire audiobook. The other side doesn't hand you peace. You bring peace with you by being disciplined. Peace is not found. Peace is built. It's built when you stop abandoning yourself. It's built when you stop lying to yourself. It's built when you stop tolerating what drains you. It's built when you stop negotiating with your own standards. That's why discipline feels so powerful. It replaces chaos with order. It replaces shame with proof. It replaces confusion with clarity. It replaces fear with competence. Competence is the deepest confidence. If you can become competent at leading yourself, you can handle almost anything. Now let's talk about the simplest way to make this permanent. You must make your discipline visible to yourself, not visible to the world, visible to you. You need a record, a chain, a scoreboard, a command book, a calendar, something that says, here is the proof, because memory gets distorted. On hard days, your mind will claim you never make progress. A record shuts that lie down. It shows you the truth. You have been building. You have been showing up. You have been becoming. And when you see that proof, you stop looking for permission to continue. You already earned it. The next step is to create what I'll call the next contract. Not a dramatic reinvention, a continuation. The reason people fall off after a disciplined season is that they treat it like a temporary challenge. They go hard for a while, then they return to normal. But normal was the problem. Normal was the drift. Normal was the leaking days. Normal was negotiation. You don't return to normal. You define a new normal. A new normal doesn't mean you live in constant intensity. It means your basics are stable and your growth continues. Your new normal might look like this. Your anchors stay. Your constitution stays. Your minimum standard stays. Your recovery stays. Your 2-day rule stays. Your focus blocks stay. What changes is the direction of your growth. Once you have the identity, you can aim it at bigger goals without losing yourself. That is the reward. You don't need to rebuild the engine every time you want to go farther. You already have the engine. You simply choose a new destination and keep driving. But let me warn you about something that will test you as you improve. Comfort disguised as maturity. There will be moments when you tell yourself you're being balanced, but you're actually being soft. Balance is real. Sustainability is real. Rest is real. But if your balance always leans toward comfort, it's not balance, it's drift. The disciplined person doesn't fear rest. They fear unconscious rest. Unconscious rest is where the phone steals hours. Unconscious rest is where food becomes numbing. Unconscious rest is where sleep disappears. Unconscious rest is where you lose the day without choosing to. Conscious recovery restores you. Unconscious drifting erodes you. So keep the distinction clear. Now I want to take you into one final story that ties everything together, because stories show what frameworks look like when life is real. A man named Samir spent years talking about changing. He had the goals. He had the intentions. He had the plans. But every time he tried, he would collapse into old habits when work stress hit. He believed he needed more motivation. What he needed was standards and systems. He finally made a 6-month contract. He didn't announce it. He didn't perform it. He wrote down his 3 anchors and built his environment around them. He installed the 2-day rule. He created a minimum standard day. He built a launch ritual and a shutdown ritual. He made a simple scoreboard. He planned recovery as non-negotiable maintenance. He prepared for temptation by identifying his first domino and putting barriers in place. The first month, he was just building the chain. The second month, he hit boredom and kept going anyway. The third month, temptation tested him hard, and he learned to pause and move instead of debate. The fourth month, he got busy, and the full routine shrank, but the minimum standard stayed. The fifth month, he hit a plateau, and instead of panicking, he tightened fundamentals and measured adherence. The sixth month, something felt different. The work didn't feel like a fight. It felt like identity. He didn't become perfect. He became stable, and stability changed everything. He had more energy, not because life got easier, but because he stopped draining it through chaos. He had more money, not because he suddenly earned more at first, but because he stopped leaking it through impulse. He had more progress, not because he became a genius, but because he learned to focus. He had more peace, not because the world became kind, but because he became reliable. When 6 months ended, nothing magical happened externally. No confetti, no grand ceremony. But internally, he knew something had happened that could not be undone. He trusted himself. That's what you're building. Self-trust is the true currency. With self-trust, you can rebuild anything. Without it, even success feels unstable. So the final mission of this audiobook is not to hype you up for a week. It's to hand you a way of living that builds self-trust until it becomes your default. If you've made it this far, you already understand what must happen next. It's not complicated. It's just not negotiable. You keep the contract. You keep the chain. You keep the standards. You protect recovery. You respect boredom. You treat temptation like weather. You measure adherence. You correct quickly. You become the kind of person who returns to the plan immediately. And then you do it again tomorrow. This is how you win. Now there's a final piece, and it's the most direct call to action you will ever need. Choose the date, 6 months, a clear start, a clear end. Not because you need a perfect calendar moment, but because you need a line in the sand. Then decide your anchors again with ruthless clarity: body, mind, future. Choose the few behaviors that, if executed consistently, change everything. Keep them tight enough that you can do them on your worst day. Then decide your constitution. A small set of non-negotiable rules that remove daily debate. Protect mornings, protect transitions, protect focus, protect sleep, protect the environment. Then build the scoreboard, track it, not for shame, for proof. Then live it. And when the old identity shows up, don't panic, don't argue, don't negotiate. Run the procedure. Pause, move, return, keep the chain. This is how a person becomes disciplined, not by never falling, but by refusing to stay down. Now we arrive at the outro, and I want it to land clean. Everything you've heard in this audiobook points to one thing: you are not waiting for a better life. You are building it. A better life is not a mood. It is a structure. A better life is not a wish. It is a standard. A better life is not a sudden breakthrough. It is 6 months of daily choices that become identity. And identity is destiny. So hear this clearly. 6 months from now, you will live in the results of what you do starting now. If you drift, you will live in drift. If you keep your word, you will live in confidence. If you protect your basics, you will live in stability. If you honor recovery, you will live in endurance. If you pass temptation tests, you will live in freedom. If you build a new identity, you will live in a new life. This is not theory. This is the mechanics of change. And the best part is this: you don't need permission. You don't need perfect timing. You don't need to be someone else. You need to be consistent. Start where you are. Start small. Stay serious. Keep the chain. When it's easy, don't get careless. When it's hard, don't get dramatic. When you slip, don't spiral. Return. That single ability to return will separate you from the version of you that kept restarting. Your future is not built by people who never struggle. Your future is built by people who refuse to quit. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this, leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. Now let the final words settle into something practical and urgent. Will you keep negotiating with your own standards, or will you end the debate and live by the Constitution you choose? When the boring days arrive and nobody is watching, will you place the stone anyway and protect the chain, or will you hand your future back to comfort? When temptation rises and the old identity offers just this once, will you pause, move, and return? Or will you let the first domino fall and pretend you didn't see it coming? When pressure hits and your routine must shrink, will you keep the minimum standard and stay yourself? Or will you disappear until life feels easier and call it patience? And 6 months from today, when you look back at the person you were right now, will you be able to say you kept your word, built your spine, and crossed to the other side? Or will you be holding another collection of day ones wondering why nothing changed?